Thanks everyone for joining us today for this webinar series where we're going to be talking about transforming your data management with Acterys and Power BI. It's the age-old problem of we have Excel overload within our organizations, and how do we go from Excel to being able to have sort of enterprise analytics at scale without all the transformation. And for those that are on that transformation journey, some of this will make even more sense. For those that are grappling and wrangling with spreadsheets, hopefully this will be a great way to look at how we can release some burden and give you back some time. Today's agenda, we'll go through some introductions and who's joining me on the webinar today from both Microsoft and Acterys. We'll get a little bit in terms of how we got here in terms of Excel overload. We'll talk a bit about Acterys, the product. What is it? For those that don't know, for those that are familiar with it, there's some new features as well that are coming through as well, which would be very, very interesting to hear about. Acterys, Power BI and Excel, that seamless integration with instant results. How do you bring together reporting landscape and start to do more from your Excel spreadsheets with a tool like Acterys? And we'll also sort of dive into some of the real world success stories, some of the use cases, how customers are using Acterys and Power BI to unlock that value chain as well. And then we talk about going from Excel to enterprise. What does that look like? So going forward for data management, what do we need to do also to sort of start to look at more maturity? And we'll also be here to also handle a few questions along the way, so making sure that we can talk you through how best to use these tools and get the most out of them. This session will also be interactive, so the chat will be open and you'll be able to ask questions as we go as well, so feel free to pop them in there. Joining me today on the call is Wendy Koch from Microsoft, heads up data and AI as a specialist, that wealth of knowledge, and also Richie Waugh from Acterys. So Richie, I think he took an off cam there, but Richie's there online as well. So here we are. Richie's there, smiling face as always. So as we go through today's session, I'm keen to get the audience feedback as well, keep this session more honed in on the areas that you really want to get the benefit and knowledge out of this session. So feel free to, again, pop questions in the chat window, but we will start with a poll just to get a feel for where everyone's at with their current journey. And we're going to classify it in three ways. Firstly, we haven't started, we don't have that centralized data platform. We work largely in silos for reporting. A lot of what we do is based on disparate data sources. We're extracting them manually, we're bringing them into spreadsheets, we're manipulating them, and we're doing our reporting tasks off that. And we struggle with reporting goals, and in particular, reporting for our data sources and processes are a bit labored, so we can't really get that sort of as real-time data reporting as we want, but we're doing it, and we're doing it with a lot of manual effort. Next, we have some maturity. So if you classify yourself this way, think about, we have, ways in which if we have a use case or we want to report something, we can progress. It still requires some, disjointed capability with the data platform. The data platform may only have, certain sources in there. It doesn't have everything. So we've still got to get data either off the platform, off third-party systems. We've still got to bring it together. And we've got to start to do that then. And new reports and designs can be developed more at an enterprise level, but again, they've got to go into the sort of priority backlog, and it does take a bit of time because we've got to go through a small team and typically takes a bit of time to get it out. So hence we still just keep working in Excel and we keep doing it what we do, what we know how to do and get results done. But, the maturity is not quite where we need it to be. And lastly, if you're a bit more in the sort of last category of maturity, we're moving along, we have a data service catalog, we know reporting is in place and self-service reporting capability exists. We have that ability to get our reports out there. We have ability to access data we need and commingle data. Also, if you think that, your reporting covers those sort of deeper areas of, AI and machine learning and those sort of things, and you can actually create new models, but Excel is used more strategically. Excel is used more in very targeted use cases, in particular areas of the business where we feel like, it's going to drive some benefit for our users, internal stakeholders or external stakeholders. So qualify one of those three, make sure you just let us know where you sit on that scale. It's just good for us to know in terms of, where to deliver the best content for you over the next sort of half an hour to 45 minutes. And also where we can actually give you the best insight as well around what we see of other organizations on that scale, on that journey, and how they've moved. So that's the poll. Importantly, we're all here because we know that there is an interest in Excel. We use it. We've become reliant upon it, as so many businesses do. We get to the point where it's pretty much a cornerstone of our business. Our spreadsheets are important to us. They carry a lot of logic, business logic that's been evolved over time, and they provide very specific but strategic functions as well as, very important BAU functions. So, we often know that the case has been this way in terms of the challenges for organizations looking to deliver more in that fragmented landscape. We see a lot of challenges with data silos, hence, Excel becomes an I'll export from here, I'll export from there, or I'll take this CSV and I'll commingle it with something else in another spreadsheet, and then I'll send it over to Mary in finance who'll have her numbers from another system, and then we'll send that back across to Bob who's going to look at, the final level of scrutiny on that. So we often see that transformation takes a longer time to process clean, the compliance and governance, the whole capability of being able to show, due care around the lineage, making sure that we've actually got that covered off in terms of chain of custody. Some of those things where we're dealing with certain data, it's a lot harder when we're sending that through the spreadsheets. And obviously the cost of scale becomes a lot harder when it's, a lot time intensive. We do not really want to sort of spend too much time in terms of hiring news resources to do more manual work. Now, I know Wendy's got a lot of insights from her dealing, so happy to let Wendy sort of talk as well, some of the challenges that she's seeing.
Thanks, Greg. No, what I'm seeing is consistent with a lot of the clients. One of the biggest things is the trust in the data. It's the trust in the figures when you're moving the data around Excel, particularly up to the management level and up to the board level. So while the conversation is about, I guess, Excel overload, I still think whatever we do, there's always going to be the use of Excel. But I think moving forward from a single source of truth and eliminating all this fragmentation, that, an enterprise reporting visualization tool such as Power BI makes a really big difference to organizations.
Very, very, very good insights. And I think that's the key aspect, isn't it? The trust, Wendy, in terms of, how do we know that what we're sending up to the board, what do we know we're reporting to, the CFO, if we're reporting to compliance, if we're looking at HR reports and we're doing those very, very strategic information reporting around bits of our data, how do we know that we haven't made that error? How do we know that that data is actually accurate for us to make meaningful insights as a business to be able to drive the decisions that we need to make to be better? And sometimes it's the 1%ers that make the real difference. And if that data is 1% off, stands to reason, the shift of variation is quite telling. One of the good things in terms of the age-old promise of, if we've got a problem today, surely someone will fix it tomorrow. I think that's a great adage in terms of what happens in technology, and this is no different to what we're seeing now with the product from Acterys. A traditional challenge of we're so reliant on Excel and we're so heavily wedded to Excel as a tool, and it's important for us in terms of what we do, and we have Excel feeding our Power BI dashboards. However, we need to then do some wrangling in between. We need to import data into Power BI. We need to change away. We need to modify formulas, those things. Acterys has come with a solution which is actually going to sit perfectly on top of Excel. It's going to provide that capability to preload your Excel report straight into Acterys and provide that overlay straight into Power BI. So I think it's a good time for me to introduce Richie, who can talk through Acterys, tell you a bit about the product in terms of what the product does, what it is, helps it come about, how it works nicely with Power BI, and also then in terms of its capability to bring in Excel data, Excel spreadsheets, and provide that reporting overlay, as well as then on top of that, how customers are using Acterys with the Excel input and the Power BI overlay in real world examples and different functions within the business.
Perfect, thank you. Thanks, Greg. So Acterys, Australian-based company, we set out to solve a very common challenge throughout all businesses of all sizes, connecting the strategic, financial, and the business components or operational components of the business through connecting data, people, process. And we saw, the big challenge within that ability to execute strategy, connecting it to financial and operational models was often proprietary technology and data movement. So, having the likes of a black box planning tool that needed to come together with actuals coming from transactional systems such as your ERP, CRM, HR, all this transactional data that feeds the outputs, you have this big integration effort, you have this big technical effort, and you have, a very high total cost of ownership, and everything's retrospective. So our big vision was essentially just to bring it all together around a common language, around the Microsoft ecosystem, around Excel, around Power BI, because at the end of the day, everything is additional. Every data project is additional to business as usual, and it's superfluous. And we always use the analogy like it's like learning a new language. We'd all like to learn French, but just don't get the time to do it. So that's often the case with technology. So we're all about putting the skills in your data teams and repurposing, reusing the skills that are already adopted in Microsoft, and it's so ubiquitous: Excel, Azure SQL, Power BI. So we're essentially just about bringing that all together, and we can show you a little bit more in a short demonstration later on. But thanks, Greg. On mute.
Oh, perfect. Thanks, Richie. It's a very, very important aspect in terms of Acterys, in terms of what it does from its capability. And as Richie said, it was born out of real world problems in terms of, certain solutions that didn't sit nicely within the Microsoft ecosystem. Acterys saw a great opportunity to take this product forward on the back of the Microsoft landscape on terms of the business productivity that could be unlocked with Microsoft tooling and going forward. So what we'll look at is an actual demonstration of Acterys now in terms of how it is actually going to, sit, what it does, and how the product feature comes together. So we will get that demo up and running now, and we'll have a look at Acterys. So I'll throw over to Richie now to pop up the demo and talk us through how Acterys looks and feels as a product.
Perfect. Okay, I'll share my screen. Cool. Just admit someone there. So everyone can see my screen?
Yep, coming through. Perfect.
Cool. Okay, so with Acterys, we're all about bringing planning and actuals together and making Power BI much more versatile than it was originally planned. As you all would know, to a certain degree, Power BI natively is read-only. It's a great visual storytelling tool, but it's only as good as its underpinning data model and ability to sort of, aggregate the data, calculate it. So with Acterys, it comes with, a certain architecture that comes with the modeler and a back end that is a data platform built on Azure SQL, but we can also integrate with, Fabric. So it's all about write back, the ability to enter data and write it back to the data platform that is underpinning the front end, which is whether it's a data lake, a data warehouse, we're indiscriminate, but it's really all around that Microsoft ecosystem. So what that really does, it unlocks this storytelling tool into something much more strategic that you can base your decisions, strategic decisions, and get alignment. So when you think about planning and forecasting in particular, it's a collaborative process that involves getting inputs from the discrete business unit department heads and getting accountability of the numbers. But the big benefit here, if you're doing your planning and your analysis on the same platform, is that if I enter a number in here using a keyboard shortcut, so this is our visuals. So if I just navigate around here, you've got, the revenues, COGS, gross margin, and I've got a model scenario, which is, a classic could be budget versus actuals here with the comparative scenario. Then I've got a KPI scorecard here. So this is a really simple business case, but we're planning by product, so we can go very granular. So I know we've got quite a few education outfits on here. You could plan by course. You could, obviously do your HR planning, which is also a big consideration when you think about delivering courses and all the different mixes of teachers. But this is a simple business which has got revenues derived from quantities of PCs. So PCs sold at this average unit price. And then you've got the revenues performance by the dimension of time, which is broken up by month. And we can go as down as, low down as daily. And we're really popular with, retail manufacturing. Some of our customers, joint customers with Acterys, Blackmores, Suntory, Pepsi, Heineken. These customers that require, quite granular views of performance. And then you have this first visual. This is an Acterys visual. So you're actually in a Power BI environment, but you're in you're using our visuals here. And this is the matrix. So the matrix, you can see it looks very Excel-like with rows and columns. And, if I edit here, you can use these keyboard shortcuts, and I can say, if I put a number in there, I can enter that, save it back, and see the immediate impact on the actual result. So the ability to do sort of planning and analysis, so manipulate the drivers here. So you can see this is all expandable. So I can collapse it. I can put a number in top down and splash that throughout the children of the actual entities below. Or I can go middle out if I have a marketing campaign and, say this is going to yield X amount of results to the end of the period. I can sort of just click R200, and then that would show an immediate impact on the financial result. But want to keep this quite fluid and interactive. So keen to see if there's any sort of questions on the visuals and how they sort of connect together with the plans and the actuals. Oh. Cool. So just switching views really quickly. This is something that we derive very quickly, and this is using Power BI in very much its, intended purpose for reporting. But this particular use case, we derived a proof of concept in 20 hours for a CFO of a major tiling company that had to sit in front of the hot seat for his board report to Bunnings. And, everything was retrospective. So the challenge that he had was he had quite a few different views in how he viewed the business. And, that was really broken up in these parameters or dimensions that we call in the model, where they had, franchise, they had residential, they had commercial, they had regions. And, the results would fluctuate depending upon those external factors that affected the sales, the housing market of those particular, regions. And he was, in the hot seat and didn't always have the questions, or didn't always have the answers. So it was often going back and saying, I'll get back to you, or partially answered. So he wanted to sort of change the tone of that whole meeting, where he could be more proactive, provide this sort of executive view, as you can see here, where you've got, an overall view of net sales and the COGS, and you've got the comparison versus the budget, you've got the OPEX. And you can see that, again, in this classic looking income statement, if anyone's tried to derive a financial statement in Power BI before, no, it's very difficult to do without these specialized visuals that Acterys offers. And the ability to sort of, have all of the revenues and the budget revenue, and, the ability to slice and dice and view performance at all these different levels. But then also the ability to, add commentary within these variants to explain variances. So if you think about, planning and reporting, you start out with an intended plan, you have a vision and a focus, and then you go out and you execute the game plan, and you collect all the transactional data at that layer, and then you bring it together, and then you want to sort of, report the business and understand the variances. And understanding the variances is kind of going to, lead to then some future questions around, well, what do we need to do now? That's a milestone in the game, in the results, that we need to sort of replan. So being able to explain variances, so he was able to, demonstrate in this particular demo that you can actually add comments to explain variances from lower levels of the business. So again, back to that accountability question, being able to get accountability of the budget owners and being able to sort of, present that in an executive view, but then also being able to drill down at that sort of P&L view and giving him a view of performance at a profitability perspective. So quite often what would happen is that he would need to, move money around to where there was better markets. So the WA housing market might be going up and renovations going up, and was going south for New South Wales and Victoria. But being able to have the data on hand or in hand to be able to then go into this sort of scenario of asking what if questions and being able to manipulate the lower levels of the drivers of performance and being able to see the material impact on the financial or the P&L, but then allowing the board to make the decision collaboratively. And that's really what, the benefit of doing the planning and analysis, but more importantly, doing it all around the Microsoft ecosystem, which, I'm sure a lot of your individuals, your analysts within your teams already have skills within. But I just want to show you just, a quick example there of just how it can be sort of used in a reporting perspective. And often that is, a common landing spot, because that, board report is a really important, critical output for finance, for the CFO, for the business, because a lot of big decisions sort of hinge off that.
And so, Richie, those commentary pieces stay with the report as well after someone's added commentary as well, correct?
Yeah, exactly. So everything's auditable. So the thing about spreadsheets and some of the, we love the flexibility of spreadsheets, but, one of the challenges is sort of that, sometimes people just change a formula and no one really knows about it. Or people, that ability to get some controls, auditability, you can leverage with the innate row level security that you get with Power BI. But then with Acterys, you get this other security piece, which is very much role-based, which can control the views. If I'm a project manager, I'm only interested in my projects, where if I'm a general manager, I'm interested in all projects. So the ability to put your rules, your views, to lock down cells so they can't, get those fat finger formula updates and, just enter the cells that they need to input the data to update a forecast or a report or a comment, but then all auditable. So yeah, thanks, Greg. Good question.
Oh, perfect. I know Wendy's got a question as well. So Wendy, I'll throw over to yourself.
It wasn't a question, it was just a commentary. So just on the back of what you've said, Richie, and to the audience here, this is classic Power BI. Acterys has actually done a very specialized module around the financial performance management, so that users don't have to create it themselves. But this dashboard, this Power BI dashboard and the workspace is very extendable to all parts of the business outside of the finance area for general reporting, for customer sentiments, for products, for anything that requires reporting to any parts of the business. So a very extensible product with Power BI, and there are clients who create their create their own reports in-house, very specific to them, and then obviously a lot of bolt-on products, Acterys being one of them.
Yeah, thanks, Wendy. And that's the key part. I think if you look more holistically at the data problem, and if you keep throwing a SaaS app at every data problem you have, you end up with this proliferation of apps. And, you've got this, what they're coined now in the data world is technical debt, where you're using 20% of the capability, but you're paying 100% of the bill. And you've got this disparate nature and multiple know-how required. And that was really what we're trying to solve, is like, hey, you're reporting in Power BI already, often within the operations, and you're using Excel already. Don't bring in another proprietary tool to solve the data problem, because you'll just have this need to learn it. So do your planning and forecasting in your reporting and analysis tool. No data movement. Close that loop quicker. You know, no learning or less learning. Obviously, there's always a little bit to learn with anything new, but it's significantly reduced when you're already leveraging what you've already got within your 365 productivity suite.
Perfect, Richie. And you sort of mentioned, you know, that it comes with Power BI and all the security is already built in terms of row-level security and access and controls and those sort of things. So naturally, then if you're surfacing this data up with this report, it'll all fall underneath your natural security posture and alignment, correct?
Correct. Yep, exactly right. And if you think about, you know, getting a project or getting a budget out, it's all very collaborative in nature. So you need that workflow, you need that ability to, you know, secure to provision those security rules, but not only to enroll them around that security profile, but retrospectively to be able to change or to audit and see changes to the model. Yeah, that's very, very important.
And the write back function, like we've all, you touched on it as well, Richie. You mentioned the ability for Acterys to allow the write back, and you mentioned auditing as well. So safe to say that if I'm a report user, I can go in, I can make changes if I've got permissions to, and I can have those write back saved. So if I'm doing that what if modeling and those things, I want to save a projection or a set of forecasts, or if I'm looking at promoting a particular product, to Wendy's point, for different reporting, if I'm doing HR reporting, if I want to look at, you know, salary costs across a certain initiative or a certain cost center, or if I want to go away and do some modeling around, maybe I'm a project manager and I'm running projects, you know, I want to look around potentially actuals and forecast spend for projects or workforce management. All of that can be done in terms of forecasting, projecting, write backs, and saving different versions of different sort of, you know, assumption modeling.
Exactly. So this is a classic example in, you know, in a planning, project planning context where you've got, you know, different project managers, and they might look at a modeled scenario. In this case, they're looking at a budget versus forecast. But you might want to, you know, update this matrix, and you can do it at the totals level, as again, you can proportionally do it with top down with the edit function, and you can see the impacts immediately. But you know, you can also have the input, and then this will drive the output. So you, with Acterys, it's always input output. So manipulate a driver, change something here, see the impact on the financial result on my KPI scorecard. You know, so I can do that from a revenue perspective in terms of planning out a project. But yeah, if I then wanted to go to sort of, you know, the HR costs, you can see that this will bring up, like to your point, a little bit about that HR piece where, you know, when you're executing a project, you've got to allocate funding to that particular project. You've got to allocate resources to that particular project. You might have individual employees tied to, you know, several projects. The ability to connect it all up, you know, using these visuals. So this is a matrix. Again, with Acterys, what you're saying, Greg, it's the ability to get into this sort of sandpit environment almost, to get all the good work that you've done on that transactional layer, get all that transactional data, bring it into a sandpit to sort of automate all the management processes where you want to get into that, you know, scenario modeling, that world of simulation, and save unlimited versions, because this is what you want to do. You want to be living in the analysis in an analytical tool, as opposed to capturing the data, wrangling the data, validating the data. All of that sort of disappears with Acterys, and especially when you're leveraging that sort of middle layer, which is what obviously Acterys offers around the data platform. But the ability to, you know, add a project, add an employee, you know, and allocate the costs across all of the different projects is ideally what you can do. It's very flexible, like Acterys. It's just about defining that use case, defining that user story, and then configuring it and getting that Excel formula business logic into a central data model. And that's key to getting those controls back and giving you structured flexibility, we like to call it. So give you what you're familiar with in way of the Microsoft interface, but give you some structures, give you the dimensionality, the cube structure, and the security of a central Power BI data model.
That's perfect. And the report interface, Richie, in terms of, configurability, you mentioned the models you have earlier in terms of those pre-existing models and those things. So, where a customer has a, defined set of requirements or, particular use cases that are in line with their business, maybe there is a need to commingle certain data or produce certain specific models. It's all sort of customizable or configurable within the platform.
Very configurable. So yeah, some of the customer stories that we've got is, integrated business planning. That's sort of a Blackmores started off, just doing traditional FP&A, P&L planning, and had a monetized demand plan that they also wanted to bring into Acterys, connect that to the forecast. So if you think about IBP, when you're going across connecting sales, operations, marketing, so HR, they're all using different systems. So that ability to augment data from multiple sources, take the key elements of those data sources in way of drivers and bring it into an integrated driver-based model. So they can eventually flex scenarios like, what does 10% growth look like on my workforce plan? Well, by the way, you need, 10 new business development reps. And did you know it takes HR 6 months to onboard salespeople and to actually be selling something? So, that whole integrated story. And in education, a classic one is the finance, HR, and student information system, those disparate systems, and bringing the relationships within a data model. That's really key. The front end, all of what we're showing today, nice, pretty, but most important part is really getting that underpinning model right and connected. And then this UI, the interfaces, it's the user experience, and that's what we're demonstrating today. But it's only as good as your ability to bring all that transactional data together in one data model.
It's very, very important, isn't it? Being able to surface the data centrally to one particular area of reporting that provides that flexibility. Often than not, we end up dealing with HR who have limited visibility into particular data, and they have their payroll data and they have their understanding of FTE costs, but then we have capital projects or parts of the business that are dealing with capital projects or workforce or initiatives, and they want to know, how do we actually get more of an understanding of what this initiative's costing us? The CFO wants to know across the organisation in terms of both the projects being run, OPEX and CAPEX, and everything else that's being organised, what's it costing me and what do I need to have in terms of cash in the bank for the next month to pay the right bills and creditors and debtors? So you start to see that sort of change of, mindset around, we need to bring these siloed data into a centralised platform that provides that sort of capability.
Absolutely. And I saw on our attendee list, a classic one is that we had one for Sydney airports, but working with airports before, like PAX numbers, passenger numbers, yes, and how that drives the revenue models and, your retail models and your negotiation with the airlines and the car park models and all of that. So it's all drivers of performance, and eventually how that all impacts the P&L and all the projects that come off that. So, yeah, it's more, I think, very, very importantly, I'll say it's like a three-legged stool. The technology is just the enabler. It really is just as important to get that vision and have that sort of sponsorship within the business of who that champion is, who's wanting to make change and sort of initiate these data projects, but being really clear on that vision and then sort of phasing it out into sort of, quick wins. What's going to give you high material business value, relatively easy to implement, is the data available, and just working through these successive, phased rollouts where you're sort of continually giving value back to the business.
This is an important one. That's sort of, the approach to bringing that value back. So, I'm an organisation. I've got lots of Excels, Richie, lots of spreadsheets which we're relying on. Our logic's in there, our data's in there. How do we get that into Acterys in a way that's, going to get the best use out of the tool?
Yeah, exactly. And working out the, working backwards from the outputs is always the key part. So working out the key outputs and always, more, it's always easier to work backwards from the outputs and starting simple, a core foundational app, adding those sophistication. But, a sales forecast is probably more important than a succession plan. So when we talk about business value, both are important, but other parts of the business really rely upon that sales forecast. So it's really about identifying those quick wins, high business value.
Richie, just a comment from me. This is definitely, in terms of my experience with more of my clients, this is definitely the business criticality, the finance data, of course. It's most important. It's the one that's shared with management and execs. You've got an out-of-the-box solution. If clients had to actually create these reports themselves, what's the effort versus the effort, accuracy, time to deliver versus adopting a solution like yours?
As mentioned, this was 20 hours. And with Acterys to build this POC. Admittedly, no data integration into the source system. We got an Excel extract, but the ability to model the data, present the data. And it's almost like we need people to fully appreciate Acterys to go out and try to build a financial report themselves initially to really fully appreciate it. And I'm sure there's some people that try to, and it's very tricky. It's very fiddly. So that's really what we're bringing to the table, these reporting visuals, this innate financial intelligence. We can turn things around very quickly and that was probably a good example of this reporting part. And some businesses might really struggle with it because if you think about it, it's quite hard to get both someone that knows Power BI and financial modeling. They're almost mutually exclusive. Or you might be a CPA who've learnt Power BI, or you might be a Power BI guy who's learnt accounting because you've been thrown the output requirement.
And just in terms of your solution, does it only work with Power BI? Because obviously, in developing this, there are a lot of visualization reporting tools out there. Why did you decide to use Power BI?
We took a punt early on in 2016, and Power BI was not the superpower it was today. But when we saw that it was $9.95 compared to all the other products we were associated with per user, we just took an early punt that, and we were from planning world. We were from, the founders' very first jobs were with Applix, which became TM1. So it was really, the vision was, let's build TM1 in Power BI. Because legacy approaches, black box sits out here, planning data, and then the actuals coming through here. So we just thought at that level of cost, it's going to be, people are going to try and make it work. And Microsoft had made it very clear that they're really going to push it hard. So at the time, I think Tableau and Click were really the main products that people were using, and just look at what's happened since. So it was, and I think the main storage piece or the data platform was AWS. So we took a punt also on Azure SQL at the time as well. But that's really changed. So I think this whole notion of best of breed has always been this continual conversation, and you think about things like AI, and people are talking about back 10 years ago was, hey, you want to spread your risk, you don't want this key person dependency. I think because it was kind of difficult to deal with some mega vendors, like I won't say the names, one starts with O, one starts with I. Just so they didn't want to get this vendor lock-in. That was all the don't get vendor lock-in. But now when you're talking about AI, it's almost like gone reverse. You've got to go an ecosystem. If you don't go an ecosystem, then you've got all this complexity in your architecture. And before you can start drawing AI insights, you're going to have to make sure the data is performant, that it's accurate, that it's sort of, easy to collaborate around. So that's changed a lot. So I just really feel like in the market, you really just got to converge on an ecosystem, whether it's Microsoft. We just chose Microsoft because we thought that's a massive market.
Yeah. Well, I think that I've got to say that punt's paid off, because I was around when, I was selling TM1, I was selling Cognos, Tableau was everywhere, Click was everywhere. And it's amazing to see that, Power BI in the Gartner quadrant as leaders, and how the adoption has just taken off, and the investment that Microsoft's made in it.
Exactly. Well, that's and you think and that was the tie-up, right? You had a big four accounting firm to deliver a really complex product, and then no one wanted to do a phase two, because I was just like, that just fills me with dread. The idea of doing a phase two. So the point is that these products never really. The Nirvana was always IBP, to bring it all, connect it all up, but you never get beyond finance and into the operational parts of the business, because you've got to teach the operations TM1. Are they going to learn TM1? Probably not. Are they already using Power BI and Excel? Yes. So you can go, the story's more elongated. It goes deeper, broader when you're talking the language of the user and talking the tools that they're already using.
Very, very good, Richie. And I think the capability that you mentioned as well, that's coming out and evolving in the Microsoft product suite with Copilot, AI tools, natural language processing, the ability for that to be brought and overlaid over the top of Power BI as well, to help with that, summation and findings in the data as well. So not only do you, find that you're with Acterys able to do the modeling and do the forecasting, do the what if analysis and save different versions, but being able to interrogate it as well using a tool like Copilot to help you find those areas of potential, interest that you should delve deeper or consider that you may not have naturally done as well. So, we know that Fabric you mentioned earlier, in terms of its capability to both be a modern data platform and SaaS platform, and also AI-enabled data warehouse, but also then Power BI in terms of its capability now with what is happening with AI and Copilot, and the ability to bring in those sort of smarts as well.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So and Acterys, where it fits there, and one of our founders has a PhD in AI and machine learning, so it's near and dear to him, but we're always very pragmatic in the use cases. So we'll be sort of interested in using AI in 2025, leveraging always like the Microsoft roadmap. So that's one of the hidden gems about Acterys, that you always got two roadmaps. You've got Microsoft's, then you've got ours. But yeah, that ability to sort of do, really dirty work, like around relationships within data, being able to automate a lot of that, so it might not be 100% of it, but it might, be able to do a lot of that mapping, which usually when it's projects, that falls on the customer side, and that usually slows things down. So, these projects, again, they're always superfluous to business as usual. One of the parts with the client side, which is onerous, is mapping, because we don't know the business logic by osmosis. We have to work with the customer to work out those relationships within the data, but using AI for those really practical use cases to automate a lot of that.
Yeah, perfect. So it's your smart and intelligence around the AI coming together with the customer's knowledge of their own data set and their own business domain and context being able to come together to provide that sort of richer field of reporting.
Great summary. Exactly.
Yeah. I've been listening to you, Richie, so that's why. And you mentioned earlier the price of Power BI back in the day. You haven't allowed for inflation and those sort of things, but it hasn't gone up that much. Again, you mentioned the per license user sort of with Power BI as well. Acterys on the licensing as well. It's per user. It's licensing. I'll talk a bit about that as well, Richie, in terms of because I know that's a major feature of Acterys as well, in that you're not subscribing to a large scale sort of undertaking when it comes to turning on the tool.
Yeah, well, a major factor for Acterys is actually this. Well, there's two parts. Is the simplicity in the architecture. So we're not introducing another database. We've got an engine, but it can reside on a data platform, that's built by Acterys, for instance, on Azure SQL or Fabric. That we're not introducing another database on top of that. So there's a real simplicity in the architecture. So the engine basically just gives it right back. It gives that data platform right back capabilities. And then we're giving you all these visuals here to interact with the data. The Smart Excel, which allows the user to use Excel formulas and write back to essential Power BI data model, which is here the Acterys modeler. So this is a web-based built on Power Query at a row, a column, a formula. Very easy to use. So if you know Power Query, you know Acterys backend in its most, complex. So nothing proprietary, open and standard. The table editor, anything that can be put as a table in Acterys can be edited in our table editor, drag and drop. So there's an engine cost, and then it's users. So you've got a super user who can, edit and modify the database, and they're an administrator or an admin. And it's really cost effective, and we're happy, and we use it. We say our prices because it's an actual, differentiator from some of the other Silicon Valley outfits that carry all the costs associated with being a Silicon Valley outfit. Is that, it's $149 a month, US dollars a month for an admin, and 89 for a planner. And then to view and interact with the the output. So you might be a manager, you might be an executive member. You just leverage those existing Power BI Pro licenses. So you don't even need a viewer license from Acterys. You're sort of leveraging those investments that you already made.
Yeah, no, amazing. And they're great points that you brought out, and I'm glad you touched on them as well, because it sounds like, it's simplicities in the fact that you don't need a large scale team to run platform and run it as a solution in terms of the admin and the planner. Those sort of key functions are very streamlined, very lightweight. Certain data platforms, when it comes to the traditional old school data platforms, especially when you're running big data and those things, you'd need 3 or 4 different types of people just to get the data to a point where it's clean before you can do anything with it, and it sounds like, the simplicity is also, in the tooling, is that it doesn't take that large overhead of people. It can work within a small team. A couple of key users can do a lot to unlock a lot of business value for a wide range of business report users and consumers.
Exactly. And that's a good example. And sometimes, a part of the business case is, hey, if you were going to throw FTE effort at this data problem, but take the tech out of it, like, it's not about, cutting people. It's all about upside, planning and forecasting. It's more about executing strategy, efficiencies, and all of those things are part of the business case. But it's more, hey, if I didn't have these guys wrangling data and capturing data, the best analytical minds, is about unleashing them and, getting them to live in Power BI, to do the simulations, to do more analysis, to have better partnering conversations around data. That's just all based around the data. So it's more about reallocating resources to high value analytics and, and really building that capability within the team. So yeah, if you were to do that, if you were to bring someone in that could actually make your team better, I mean, on the sports band, but there's some players that are brilliant individuals. There are some players that make the team better, and really that's really what Acterys aims to do, is to make your team better, to give value across the business.
Yeah, and Richard, just a comment to what you said. Just a comment to what you said around the licensing. So a lot of our clients will have like an M3, or definitely like an E3 or an E5 license. If you've got an E5 license, that gives you Power BI Pro across the whole organisation. If they've got an E3 license, they might have selected Power BI Pro licenses. So what you're saying, they can reutilise this to actually view the reports that you guys have created.
View the reports, consume the reports, they can have their dashboard, whatever it is, whether it's an account clerk who's just got a view of the AR and what they need to chase, which affects the cash flow, which affects a lot of things, So they can be, they don't have to be all strategic users, but have a very important role within the business. And you can reuse those Power BI licenses.
And the great thing, Richie, as well, with the sounds of things, given the flexibility of Acterys to consume from different data sources, different data repositories, it means that as an organisation changes from being Excel heavy, a little bit of data coming from a data warehouse or somewhere else, and they start to look at adopting new platforms, say Fabric, and they're going to go on that journey, they're able to not have to worry about what changes at the front end, because Acterys essentially is just picking up the data from the new source. It's just getting that same data.
I love that comment, because that really is where people often come to us when it's talking about outputs. People often say, can you integrate with D365? Can you integrate with SAP? Can you do? But it's more about that this stuff might change, like you say, that source layer, we're kind of indiscriminate. We don't care about the source. It's this consistency that you want here in the ecosystem is that middle piece around the Microsoft and the Fabric and the Azure SQL, whatever it is. That's where we believe there should be consistency, because that picks up all of the best of breed or whatever you want in way of your transactional systems. Because you always give a little, like it's hard to be good at all things, right? When it's ERP, often in Australia, the payroll will be a third party, for instance. So, and often people don't want the headache of, say in SAP, we're getting a lot of success with people who are using SAP as their ERP, but they don't want the headache of BPC or, all the peripheral solutions around SAP. It's a great system of record. It does a great job of ERP. It gives me the flexibility to, model my business the way I need it. But I don't want that complexity here in this middle layer.
Yeah.
And in the front end and the user experience. I just want to be able to, this should be, consistent and clean.
Yeah, well, it's a very valid point. Wendy?
No, just Richie and Greg. In the interest of time, because we've only got 7 minutes left, do you want to move on and then get to question and answer? I just don't want the audience to not.
Yeah, certainly. Let's continue on with a couple of our slides. Won't keep you too long. Let me just. So, just come through. So we've gone through in terms of the overview of how we've looked at Excel coming about. We looked at Acterys and Power BI and some real world examples. Thanks Richie for the hardware example. I think that's a good one as well across those. And I think then, what we've seen in Acterys as well is in terms of taking the tool from an Excel input to enterprise, Acterys, Power BI comes together to scale really well. We've got what we would consider in a data world when we start looking at transformation strategy, a very modular, agnostic front end, which can plug and play with different data sources. So I think the investment when you look at something like an Acterys as a tool to complement your Power BI, along with the enhanced enabled models, we start to see that accelerated journey as well as that adaptability. So if we start to look at data transformation and we think, well, we do need to move off Excel, we need to stop having so many large scale teams dealing with that. We need that digital transformation. We don't have to look at, the investment in Acterys, investment in Power BI being a waste. It's actually building for the future, because when we start to talk about, from Antares perspective, data transformation, we see a lot of the drivers from organizations being around that unification of data management, the quality of data that we're getting, the lineage, the chain of custody, understanding that, and then also using that to do more with the solutions. So we talked AI. If we know where our data is, we can start to do more things with AI. We can start to empower the internal, external users and stakeholders. And I think that's an important one from Acterys and Power BI, is that we want to empower them with the ability to have the tooling, the forecasting, the planning, the analysis, but also the data to make the valid decisions as well. And that engagement as well. I think the more we see that we have to wrangle and struggle, I think Wendy touched on it as well, around if we have to go away and build a P&L report inside Power BI, it's going to take us a lot of time. It's actually quite hard to sort of all together pull that model together as well. So we really need to look at, how do we take on those transformation pieces with tools that are adaptable, that will sit in the ecosystem and serve for the long term. As we change things in the back end, we're not actually sort of, painting ourselves into the corner. So we want a good reporting and data landscape. We want to be able to move to that. So for the meantime, if we've got Excel, we've got Acterys, which can take that as data source along with others, we've got the ability to have that transformation happening with Acterys, with the actual sort of solution in there coming in, that sort of modeling that based on KPIs and measures, looking at those sort of aspects of your data. The compliance, the governance is there, security, the auditability, the reporting, it comes native to Power BI, RLS, those sort of things are important to understand as well, because the first question we often get when we look at bringing another solution is how does it sit within the landscape, right? Are we actually bending or breaking? And when it can scale as well, so as Richie's point, Power BI users can simply access with a pro license. We don't need to worry about doing anything in particular to push this out to more users within the business. So So I'll touch on, I'll go straight to questions. I know there's a few other slides here which we'll get to, but keen to sort of take them offline as well, just around, how to move away from, Excel in the longer term. And I'll come back to them as well around the Acterys offer around the data assessment as well, and that's available too. But keen just to sort of pause there on the question pieces. Is there any sort of questions from the audience with a few minutes to go? Is there anything that anyone would like to raise or ask? Now we've talked a fair bit and talked through a fair different aspects of the tooling and the solution. I think if there's no other questions, any sort of key final words, Wendy, from yourself?
I'd be interested to know in the audience if anybody here is using Power BI and looking at Acterys to sort of supplement their use, or are they still all in Excel?
Maybe any sort of show of hands, questions, thumbs ups for Power BI users? Yeah, got a couple.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect. So again, yeah, there's a few more
Good.
there as well.
Yep.
Perfect. Hopefully the session as well, just by show of thumbs up as well, will be, could you see something like Acterys sort of coming into your landscape and providing some benefit, given that it's going to sit across Excel, come with sort of pre-established reports? Thumbs up there if you think that, something like this is going to help the ability to sort of push up reports to those people, to Wendy's point, to the execs, to those areas that, need it. It's good to see from a thumbs up there as well. Perfect. No problem. Okay. Anything on yourself, Richie, before we close out as well?
No, I think I spoke a lot. Thank you very much.
That's okay. No, perfect. That's good. Content is valuable as well. I think it's great to see how the ecosystem comes together. Like I said earlier, we've had old age problems and those adages that have sat there for so long that we've become reliant on tools. It's great to see that, new products come into the ecosystem to help solve challenges we've just learned how to live with, if that makes sense. So I think it's great that, organizations like yourself come along and say, there's a smarter way to do this and a better way. So appreciate the insight.
Thanks for having us. Thanks, Greg.
No problem. Thanks, Wendy. Thanks everyone on the call that's joined us. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Likewise. Thanks, guys.
Hope you found it all
Bye.
useful. We'll be in touch. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.